So this morning, in the aftermath of the election, there are all kinds of questions about the future of the GOP after President Obama's re-election victory. Some say the Republican Party has a lot of work to do to keep up with the changing demographics of this country. Let's talk about it with Juan Williams, a Fox News political analyst, Mary Catherine Ham, editor-at-large of HotAir.com, also a Fox News contributor. Juan, pick Florida, for instance. We don't know where that state ultimately is going to end up. But if you take Florida, Virginia, Colorado, Nevada, those are states that used to be reliably conservative and seem to have gone into the, well, they all went into the Obama category this time. We don't know about Florida yet. You change those around, you've got a different president. What happened?
Well, I think in large part it was the presence of the Latino vote as a significant block, John. And I think this is part of the changing face of America in general and the population. But in the specific context of last night's election, it's the changing face of the American electorate. And you take a state like Florida, it used to be you would think, oh, well, it's the Cuban Americans. But as we just heard, now you're talking about Puerto Ricans, people coming from all over Latin America, and they are not reliably Republican voters. In fact, last night, Cuban Americans went for Romney, but the rest of that Latino population way outnumbered them and went heavily for President Obama. And, this is reflected then in questions like, do you care? Which candidate cares about people like me? Which candidate is going to reflect my interest? And for Hispanics who were 1 percentage point more in turnout than they were in 2008, the answer was overwhelmingly Barack Obama.
Mary Catherine, Hispanics tend to be socially conservative. Does the Republican Party have no appeal?
I think there's an appeal to be made that's not being made. But look, I think Obama ran, not a feel-good campaign that ended up being good enough. And the reason it was good enough was largely because of some of these demographic switches and shifts in these swing states. I think the GOP has known this is a growing problem for them, and that's actually one of the reasons that Rove and Bush worked together during Bush's term to try to get comprehensive immigration reform done. They thought that was the play for these voters. But they've known it's coming for a while, but I think they thought they could sort of stave it off, and I thought that the electorate would frankly look like a little bit more of a mix between 2010 and 2008 than it did like 2008. It ended up looking like 2008. Fewer men, fewer white voters, fewer independents. And so Barack Obama was able to build this firewall growing with Hispanic voters and black voters in these important states, which meant that he could lose independence in a place like Ohio or tie an independence in Wisconsin. I mean, it's a problem.
And in a state like Florida, I was astounded to read, Juan, that there are nearly 250,000 more Hispanic and black voters in Florida this time around than there were just 4 years ago. And that's where the president made his real inroads.
Well, that's a strategic, and I'm so glad you pointed out, John. I think that's really insightful for people who are watching to understand that it wasn't just that the president went back and got the 2008 numbers from the same group of people. There were more of those voters, Latinos, blacks, but also young women, young people, and he therefore was able to tap into an increasing pool of voters. So if you think about it, again, it was older white voters, over 65, overwhelmingly for Romney, younger people of all colors, but heavily of minorities, heavily for Barack Obama. One of those groups is leaving the electorate. The other is pushing into their middle years and even greater power in the electorate. So that's why the Republican Party is going to have to figure out how to deal with this strategically or find themselves pushed out in all the upcoming presidential races.
So, Mary Catherine, give me a 20-second answer to a 4-year question. How do they fix it?
Well, I think the good news is that on the bench, sort of the rising stars of the Republican Party, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz in the Senate, Nikki Haley in South Carolina, women and minorities, Susana Martinez, who are going to be needed to communicate this message and have to do it with a friendly face, and I think are capable of doing that, many of them very good politicians, but it's not easy because John McCain and George Bush probably put more on the line politically for immigration reform than Barack Obama. And yet this is where the tide is leading. So there's appeal to be made, and it has to be made you have to go to those voters, and there hasn't been enough of that going on.
Mary Catherine Ham and Juan Williams. Good discussion. Thank you.